Did they get the saw down today, Jim?
They got it done yesterday.
Okay.
Looks good.
Oh yeah, that does look good, by the way. Really looks good.
Those two parkings, and I was looking at my two parks because I voted for it.
Yeah,
It's a little
yeah.
tight.
It does look good.
It is because we couldn't move the guy wire. I wanted to move it about 1.5 feet, but we couldn't move it.
What about all the,
All that phone stuff, the spaces are 4 inches narrower than the other ones on Main Street.
But what about the that big phone call?
I can't even tell if it's live. It's been open for years.
What is it?
Yeah, I thought about
Like
making,
phone tower.
getting a big tubular thing like a rod and you just paint it or something.
Well, I told Brian to just go ahead and tear it out and then we'll find out if it's live or not. Yeah. He wouldn't do it.
it looks like everybody in town is connected.
It sure does.
Unbelievable. And it's open.
It's been open. It's been open. And I guarantee you somebody's messed with it at some point. It can't be live. And we've told the phone company about it to come close it up and they.
Really?
Yep. It'd be great to put it in something that's lower and looks, I mean, even if it's a little box.
Yeah.
Hey,
It's that windswept look.
we got done any rescue? A lot of people had it.
There you go. So I don't believe it.
Okay. Bob, can you hear us? Thank you. Everybody ready? Let me call to order the meeting of the Highlands Town Board for Thursday, September 20th, 2024. The first item on the agenda will be the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence. Would you please join me in a moment of silence? Thank you. Have the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Our next item will be the statement of conflict of interest, which is posted in the agenda packet. If any members have a conflict of interest on any item tonight, that should be made known to the board and to the public. The next item will be the public comment period. And let me just emphasize that there'll be two opportunities for public comment tonight. First, we'll have our general public comment where someone can come and talk about anything that you would like to discuss with the board. And I know there might be some things that you'd like to address that's on the agenda. And then also we'll have a public hearing for the adoption of our budget. And at that time, if anyone would like to come and make a comment about the budget, that time will be available for the public. So with that said, if anyone would like to now come up and make a public comment, I'd invite you to come to the microphone and please state your name for the record. I do not believe we have anyone who wants to make a public comment at this time, so we will just move on to. I said anything that you'd like to talk about. Right. Yes.
Kevin Gabbard, good to see y'all. It's been a couple of years, so we're back on the topic again, I guess, as we are. I live in Highlands, lived in Highlands now 25 years. children went to Highlands School. I love Highlands. I'm all for everything to make Highlands better. As we talked to 4 of you 2 years ago about I have a short-term rental here in Highlands. That is my livelihood. At the time that I spoke to you then, I spoke to you and I was remodeling my short-term rental. And I'd already had bookings. And at that time, I think the lawyer, he's not here anymore, I don't believe. He had said that, no more short-term rentals and this and that. At that point, he said, well, you just have to sue me, I guess, is a comment I got from the town lawyer at that time. But at this point, 2 years later, I guess I thought we got grandfathered in. September 15th, I bought my rental in late 2020. And in the discussion came about on September 15th. We got grandfathered in, I thought. At this point, I guess grandfather is not what happened. It's not what some of you'd want, I assume. I thought once it was grandfathered in, I'd be okay. That's my livelihood. Now, obviously, this is a major topic that you're bringing up to try to eliminate total short-term rentals. I've had no issues with mine. From the reports I've heard in town, I think, as we stated 2 years ago, crime, police reports, this and that. That's I don't know. Again, the issue of why this is still a major topic with you all. But anyway, we'll hear more about it. I know in 2020, I think most of you have been on the board, except for Jeff, since 2012. Is that correct? I know in 2012, your town attorney at that point removed the restrictions at that time on STRs. That was approved by you all plus the town attorney. So that's a fact. And I don't come up here making up things and things like that, but that's a fact. And then in 2022 and getting to 2022, I assume, then we come into this discussion of let's eliminate short-term rentals and too much, whatever reasons you all have. Everybody has their own personal opinions. That's fine. Again, I'm not here to break up, bad short-term rentals, but I bought the property under the guidelines of 2012. That's why I bought the property. And that's, at that point, I stated that, and I thought that was an unfair decision. And then I thought the town made a good decision and grandfathered those in that had made properties and going forward. You're diminishing short-term rentals going forward, that's fine. I think was a fair decision at that time. But I guess I just need to hear more from you all tonight of why we're still going down this road when I know from what I've read and heard that the town attorney has his advice to y'all has been it's diminished. His quotes from the paper, obviously y'all read that. It's diminishing and everything's going down, but you're not taking your advice from your attorney. I think it was there's no local government, as we know. I'm not giving any new facts here. There's no local government in North Carolina that has amortized STRs. So you're trying to be the only town in the state of North Carolina to try to do this. I don't know. Is it really that big a problem? I think there's more money to be spent in the town on our electrical system, sewer system, town repairs. I know we've wasted a lot of money. There's numbers on that I won't quote. Nobody really knows what we've paid from what I understand in the history of lawyers and this and that. We can come up with our own numbers, but it's been a lot of money that we have spent on this topic now for 3 years. And the rules you've made, and I think the mayor, without quoting, getting him involved, and I couldn't have said it any better today when I read that. And I thought the same thing. It's like, why don't we just make the rules? And I said this 2 years ago. those who have STR, if you know, if there's a problem with some, and I'm sure there could be a problem with some, there is. But I think a high percentage, whatever percentage you want to call it, I know it's in the 90s, that there's not a problem with short-term rentals. They bring a lot of income to the town. We know that. Some of you don't want any income in the town for whatever reason. We don't want this town to prosper. I don't know why. That's okay. But if there's not a problem with what's going on, you know who they are. I guess you must know who the STR problems are. We have noise ordinance, don't we? We have police. If you're a neighbor and whatever, what would I do? I'd call the police and report. We know who they are. Make fines. I said 2 years ago, if you have to come to my place, you know my number, fine me $500 every time. And the next time, fine me $1,000 if I'm doing something wrong. I think that's only fair. I think that problem would be, I think this is a simple solution. Those who are, whoever they are, there must be some sort of problem that keeps coming about, whoever they are. I don't know who they are. I have no time to investigate who the problem short-term rentals are. But I know there's a large percentage that's not. And I have one in the city and 2 others, but I have a high rating on Airbnb, and I just think I'm being signaled out, or others are being signaled out just for this case. But anyway, I'll shut up. But that's I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Okay. I'll still entertain public comment. Hearing none, I'm going to move on now to the next item, which would be to review and approve the agenda. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda?
Motion to approve as presented.
All in favor, please signify by raising your hand, saying aye.
Sure.
Thank you. We have an agenda. Our next item, number 6, is the approval of the May 2nd special meeting minutes. Do we have any changes, corrections, or clarifications to those minutes?
I had one question.
Okay.
It's on page 11. It's number 11, the police department BLT pay. The last line says discussion was held and the board agreed. I have no idea what we agreed on. It doesn't say. We didn't really agree. We agreed. I think the chief was going to put together something. She doesn't want to do it from the beginning. We were talking about scholarships. We talked about other things. So I don't know what we agreed on. So it may be just the board had discussion, because I don't know that. Did we agree on anything, Josh?
I think we
Chief?
agreed to the basic concept that we had to support our candidates going through BLT.
To go through BLE2.
Yep.
Would be
Crux of that.
Right.
would be paid until they're certified to become a full-time officer.
And the chief was going to set up a procedure for doing that, because that pay might not start immediately, because there are cases where people start and all of a sudden say, this is not for me, and leave. But there was she was going to develop a protocol on how that person would work through that program and get compensated. And the rationale behind that was everybody else is doing it and we have to recruit.
I got it.
Okay.
I think we should say that we agreed that we need to do something about recruitment and helping the,
Agreed in principle, but we don't know the details.
right, but we don't.
So
know.
that we could budget for it.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So I just think that it needs to, as a clarification, we don't have anything we actually agreed on, other than that it does need to be, we need to address it.
Would it cover it in your mind if it said
Yeah.
agreed in principle?
Yeah. Otherwise, somebody's gonna be thinking about what we agreed to,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
have no idea what we agreed to.
Agree to any principle. Okay, any other clarifications? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the special meeting minutes of May the 2nd?
Make a
So-
motion to approve this amended.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye. Thank you.
Aye.
The next one would be the approval of the May 16th regular meeting minutes. Do we have any changes, clarifications, or corrections?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Our next item is reports, starting with the mayor. So let me go ahead and be brief tonight. I will be having my monthly mayor's coffee at the Hudson Library. That'll be Friday on June the 28th. I'll be talking about, just the sweeping issues of confronting the town at the present time, and encourage people to come and be a part of the coffee and the discussion. Other thing, I went to last night to a meeting at the Hudson Library of the new affiliated monitors who are taking over from Gibbons monitors concerning the APA and the conditions of compliance with Mission HCA. I won't go into any details, except I was very impressed with these new monitors. I think that they'll bring a fresh approach to reviewing the APA and so forth. So I look forward to more communications with the new affiliated monitors. That's basically my report. So if anyone else, any of the commissioners have updates or reports?
Well, I'll just say, and Jeff can chime in here, we're going to talk about the playground fundraising a little bit later in the meeting. So I was going to address some of that there. The only thing I was going to mention is the Macon County EDC was met last Thursday in Highlands, and Kay hosted them at the Chamber of Commerce. The mayor attended that.
Right.
The main agenda items were there's a it's called the Pulse program, which the county is looking at funding. The EDC recommended funding it to a tune of $50,000, which provides programs that introduce Franklin School students to the trade professions. So whether that ever comes to Highlands, that's to be seen. But the other thing too, and I thought this is just more of interest, that we also talked about a company called Duotech, which is based out of Franklin, and it's kind of interesting. So I never knew what Duotech was until I looked it up on the website. And the reason I'm mentioning this, because in the meeting they talked about adding 95 new jobs in Franklin at a salary of $90,000 plus per year. And these are people with degrees in engineering and computer science. So looking up on their website, they claim to reverse engineer, manufacture electromagnetical equipment. But then talking to the CEO that night, we learned that they specifically work on the radar systems and the flight control systems of F-16 fighter jets and C-130 cargo planes. So who would have known that all happened in Macon County? I just thought that was pretty cool to hear about and just to mention tonight.
And Brian and I went down this past, and we'll again talk about playground here in a little bit, or at the end of the meeting, towards the end. But we did go down and meet with the county commissioners, and we did make a request to them of $350,000 towards the new playground, and which is about 20% of the total project. And we are going to be going back this next meeting to make, that was kind of an introduction to it for most of them. And then we're going to go back and make a formal request with a PowerPoint and all the fun stuff. So, and hopefully it's not part of their budget that they just passed. But we're asking them to do a fund balance allocation to give us
So
a
you want
350.
it in this next fiscal year?
Correct.
Yeah, but it'll be come out of fund balance rather than their $64 million budget they just passed. Correct.
Very good. Appreciate y'all doing that. Any others? Our next report will be our town manager, and Josh, I don't know what your report's going to be, but if you can give kind of a legislative update. If not, I'll do the legislative update on bills that are critical to us. Go ahead.
Well, as far as that goes, I did get a text a little bit earlier from Carl Gillespie, our House representative. Been trying to get the Gorge bill passed for the whole short session here. And it's in the Senate's hands, and it's come out of rules and been reviewed and went back in rules. Came back out today evidently and was heard and went back in rules. So there's some back and forth going on because they can't agree over the budget. And so no bills are going forward at this point. And it looks like they're probably going to adjourn for a few weeks in a week, like they thought they were going to do after all. around the 1st of July. And then they'll probably end up having to come back in August to finish the budget. So I don't know if the Gorge Road bill will be passed this year or not. So it's kind of frustrating to everyone. I think Kevin and Carl both, because they've got it to the finish line and just can't cross it. So we'll just have to wait and see if it goes into the long session next year, whether it has to be reintroduced. So that was an update I just got. Any updates that you've received?
I talked with Sherry Sims at the drugstore today and explained about the issue with the HB 246, which would help small local pharmacies with reimbursement. And again, it passed the House and it just needs the Senate approval and signature of the governor. And it's kind of like what you're talking about, Josh, with the Gorge bill. We're just kind of in limbo here as the legislators work all these issues out over the budget and passing these bills.
Just some project updates. Little Bear Pen Road is now open again. The repairs were done. It turned out really, really nice. New guardrail all the way down the road, which wasn't there before, for safety. New pavement. The center line will be a little while before they stripe the center line, but we went up through there, our crews did, and dotted the center line with white paint for now. Hopefully we can get our stripers back in later in the summer. Second Street project turned out really good. It's complete and paved. If you haven't been down there to see that. I've also completed 2 water line upgrade, water line replacement projects, and we're working on the third one right now. Hopefully get it done before the end of the month. And then Town Hall will be closed on Thursday, July 4th.
Thank you. All right, our next item will be the consent agenda. Do we have any questions about the consent agenda items in your packet?
I had one question. The updated Highland School SRO MOU, is that the same thing it's always been, or are there changes in
Yes,
that?
it's the same thing. They had to update the names on there, cover Chief Holland
Okay,
was added, as well as the principal, Sarah Holbrooks.
okay, so it's essentially the same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I move we accept the consent agenda.
A second.
Second, all right, very good. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify by saying aye. Thank you. All right, the next item will be a public hearing for fiscal year to 2024-25 town budget. And the first item would be a motion to open the public hearing. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Signify by saying aye. Thank you. And the next item will be our staff comments and recommendation.
So, Mr. Mayor, since the budget presentation on May 16th, the budget has increased from $44,975,373 to $45,239,373. The increase is due to the carryover of several capital projects, including $27,000 for the caustic tank replacement project, $27,000 for striping on Little Bear Pen Road, $51,000 for ongoing sidewalk repairs, $25,000 for snowplow and spreader, and $82,000 for the community building renovation project. Therefore, the fund balance appropriations in the general fund and water fund are increased to cover the additional need. The proposal for the property and liability coverage for the town also increased. In addition to the increase in the current coverage, staff made the decision to raise the coverage limits to lessen the town's exposure after discussions with our insurance company. Those are the amendments that are made to the budget presented on May 16th.
Okay. Thank you. Our next item would be public comment. If anyone would now like to come and make a comment about the proposed budget, please come forward and state your name for the record. And I'll now open the floor to the public for comment. Okay. It's my determination that we do not have any public comment. So I would now move to a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand.
Right.
Signify by saying aye. Thank you. The next item would be council action. You heard the town manager make those changes since the last draft. We have any questions or discussion?
And those were carryovers from projects from this year. So we had already budgeted that from last year, didn't spend that money, we'll spend it in this coming fiscal year. So I move we approve the 24-25 budget as presented.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And again, on behalf of the board and the town, I want to congratulate and thank the town manager, Josh Ward, our financial director, Rebecca Schuler, and all the department heads and everyone that's worked together to pull this budget together. It's a major task that takes a lot of time and a lot of preparation and concentration. So thank you for all of the work y'all done. Okay, our next item will be Unified Development Ordinance Amendments. And we will have Mr. Michael Mathis come up and make comments and recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor. So if y'all will remember, we've been dealing with this, it feels like for a few months now. We've had the public hearing and the planning board has reviewed both of the proposals for the UDO amendments. And they recommended approval. They just went ahead and recommended approval of either one of them. So putting the ball back in the board's court, just to give you a reminder, proposal number 1 would actually amend the UDO. It would keep all the same language in there under terms of compensation for planning board and zoning board. And all it would be doing is changing for the planning board from 1 year to 3-year appointments. And for the zoning board, it would be removing the sentence about a member cannot serve more than 2 consecutive terms. The second proposal would actually remove both of these terms and compensation sections from the UDO. And then in the future, if we wanted to amend our appointment or policy of on appointments to boards and committees, then we wouldn't have to go through this public hearing process to do so. Either option is acceptable. And I just, like I said, we've had a public hearing, the planning boards give their recommendation. So y'all have full authority to take action tonight on either option.
So they're essentially the same, except it streamlines it if we take the things like the term limits and out of the UDO, so we don't have to have a public comment period. So that it's essentially the same thing. It just, and we would still have to do it in open session, any of those changes of policy and those kind of things. It's just, we don't have to go through the public comment period. So do you want a motion or do you want?
I think we'd need a motion on item 10.
Okay, I would move that we approve proposal 2, which takes the policy part of it out of the UDO and then creates the policy at the same time.
And that the amendment is consistent with our comprehensive
Our minister is assistant with our community
comprehensive plan.
Okay.
comprehensive plan.
Okay. We have Commissioner Pearson seconding. Do we have any further discussion? Yes, sir.
So what you're saying is if we adopt number 2, then the policy as redlined out and attached would apply. I have a problem with it after further thought. My only beef is the zoning board of adjustment membership has 2 people that can own property or business, not live in town, but be on the zoning board. And I just think there's
That would be in the township then.
yeah, I understand that, but not affected by any zoning rulings they might make. And I really think owning a business or property is not like living here. And I think the people that are gonna pass laws need to be held to them. And I don't think owning a business certainly does not constitute being held to anything. And owning property is
just kind of owning property. So I would propose that we keep the verbiage, the zoning board of adjustment memberships shall consist a minimum of 5 members who reside within the corporate limits of the town. That's the one change that I would make to that red line.
Now,
And I understand
That's
we've had
separate.
problems getting people on the board. I don't think we need to lower our standards because we're having problems. I mean, that's what we're doing.
did you propose number 2, item number 2?
Yeah, to take it out of the.
So
UDO.
if we did remove it from the UDO, we could still make that change on the
Yeah.
policy, Buzz, and add it there.
Yeah, but we're saying, Amy's saying that
I,
the policy would
I
also
made
be
the motion for
adapted,
both.
adopted at the same time.
For both.
Otherwise,
Okay,
I
sorry.
Wouldn't have this problem.
Well, if y'all want to do it one at a time and just adopt the UDO amendment, and then if we want to make changes to the policy.
Fine, I'll amend my motion to adopt the UDO consistent with our comprehensive plan.
Okay,
To proposal number 2, which takes out the terms.
Second.
okay. All right. Debbie, did you get that down? Okay. Everybody clear on it? Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor for the motion, please signify by raise your hand, signify by saying aye. Okay, thank you. All right. Michael, what is our next step?
I'm confused, excuse me, so is what Buzz said not being considered?
It's being considered now.
Yeah, it is.
Now
We're doing the
Yes,
policy.
yeah.
So now at this point, if we wanted to do that, I think the simplest change would be under the Board of Adjustment line, just make all 7 members reside within the corporate limits of the town.
I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but I have a question. So if you live in the city limits and you rent a place, you could be on the zoning board.
Yeah.
But if you own a property in town, you can't be on the zoning board if you live in the township. That's what you're saying. So you said it would, they're not affected by zoning, but I'll be honest with you, a person that's renting a house isn't affected by zoning. But they can
Well,
be
that's
on the
true.
town board, and I'll be honest with you, that's me right now. I'm renting a house. I'm in interim in between now and moving into a house I'm gonna build. So I'm a renter. I currently don't own a property in the city limits. I will very, very shortly, but I don't immediately. So I'm just raising that question. I don't disagree about taking, just because you own a business. I own a business in town too. But I don't have a problem with removing that a business owner, because I'll be honest with you, if you really want to be technical, I can set up an LLC by morning online, and I technically have a business, so I don't mind that one. I'm questioning. I'm not saying that I'm kind of okay either way, because that's a change that wasn't there before and we're introducing it. But I just raised that question. I think that owning property gives you kind of a right, as long as you're in the township as well. But owning a business, I can strike that, and I'd have no issue with that whatsoever, because
I think that's a valid point. Bob, what's your thought as far as the definition of residency? I know a lot of people across the whole United States rent for long terms of their lives and are considered to live, but maybe they don't serve in a municipal position to make judgments on other folks.
But I would interject, if you're renting, you are eligible to vote in municipal elections.
That's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and it qualified me. So I'm not just an
Even
example,
now,
because currently I own property, but it's just not in the city limits at the moment. It will be in the next 2 months, but it's not.
And that's why I think that's a very valid
Yeah.
point, because I don't think we should disqualify people. Maybe I'm over analyzing it in my first statement. Maybe we should not be disqualifying people because of their type of residence.
Right, but I don't think, but
As long as they've lived here X amount, as long as
yeah.
they qualify
Yeah.
for residency.
But I'm 100% behind, if you own a business in town and no property, no nothing, and you
It
live in
doesn't mean
the, correct, it doesn't. So I'm good with that. I just question, I mean, if I own a 30-acre tract somewhere and that zoning affects me tremendously. I mean, I don't, all the land I own is in Horse Cove right now, but
But it could.
it could.
Could.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I mean, yeah, I'm just questioning whether, I don't disagree with the premise, but I would take I kind of in agreement with half of that. I would take the business owner out of it. But if you own property in the city limits, I think that that should still qualify for you. It should still qualify you because it does affect you. It's just my own thought.
Good point.
Well, Bob, any comments on residency?
So first a question, and I just don't know the answer to this. Does the town exercise extraterritorial jurisdiction?
No.
Okay. So if you did, then you'd be required to have proportional representation on the boards. So I think this is discretionary with the board. I would point out, if I'm reading the proposal correctly, it does not require you to have 2 members of the planning board who live outside the corporate limits. It says may, so you still have discretion. If somebody applies or you're thinking about appointing somebody who does not live within, is not a resident of the town, you can assess that on a case-by-case basis and look at the extent to which that individual is involved in town affairs. I mean, you might have somebody who owns a little remnant property that is unusable, and you may decide that's not really what we mean by somebody who owns property in the town. The way it's written, you ultimately have reserved to yourself discretion. It just says that you can have up to 2 members who live outside, but it does not mandate that you do so.
Is that helpful, Commissioner Dotson?
No. I'd acquiesce for the renter.
And well, and the property owner. I mean, if they own property, but not the business owner.
But not a business.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a.
Just on the business.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They come
like I
and
said,
go. They come and go all the time.
Whatever. I mean,
Well-
I think I would strike just own property. I'd get rid of the business.
Mhm.
Part statement of that. And then, like I say, we still have discretion whether we think they're invested in the county as far as.
And if they're a renter and they move, they're automatically disqualified anyway.
Yep.
So do we replace them at that? I mean, do we put that into the policy
I
that
think it's.
that
I
they're
think it's there.
replaced?
I think it's there.
Okay.
We've had that happen before.
we-
Have we not had that happen before where someone actually moved outside and they were automatically removed from
I
the
think
board?
so.
Yes, it definitely has happened when I was on.
So you happy with that? Just to take the business out?
Yeah, sure.
Fine. You'll make that an emotion.
Yeah, I'll make that a motion that we adopt the policy with minus the option of business owner qualification
For zoning board, for both.
for zoning board only.
Yeah.
Policy on appointments to boards and committees.
I'll second that.
There's a
Do you
second.
understand what we're saying?
Yeah, I've got her marked out.
And we're, just to make sure we're all on the same page, we're talking about item number 11, because we removed the language from the UDO and now we're simply making this as a policy statement position. That is correct. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye. Thank you very much. Okay. Our next item will be number 12, and that is the Pines Holdings LLC rezoning request. Mr. Mathis.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to read this memo and then I've got an owner of the property here and their representative on Zoom to field any questions you may have. And of course, if you have any questions for me, but on April 16th, 2024, Pine Holdings LLC submitted a rezoning petition to the Town of Highlands Planning Department. The subject property at 424 Pine Street is 0.977 acres and zone B2 conditional zoning. The B2 conditional zoning ordinance and map amendments were approved by the Town of Highlands Board of Commissioners on April 21st, 2022.
Pine Holdings LLC request a rezoning from B2 CZ to B2 General Use District. Included in your agenda packet is the Alta survey, which was completed on December 3rd of 2020. And the planning board reviewed this request on May 28th, 2024. They recommended approving the rezoning request. And the staff recommendation tonight would be to set a public hearing for the July 18th town board meeting.
Any questions of Mr. Mathis? Or the representatives here?
I'll make a motion to set the public hearing for July 18th.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Michael.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Our next item, short-term rental authorization draft language discussion. I know Commissioner Steele, can I kind of do an intro? And then I'll
Absolutely.
turn it over to you. At our last meeting, members of the board, certain members of the board requested that our town attorney, Bob Hagerman, come up with a draft of language that would impose an amortization period on the grandfathered short-term rentals that we have in place now. Before you tonight is that draft. And I will also say to the public and others, if this moves forward, this is just an initial step in a process where we will have input from the planning board, we'll have public input and so forth. And I will just say that, I've made my position clear. While I think everyone's goal would be to see a reduction in short-term rentals in residential areas, I feel like we ought to, stay the course and if necessary, improve our enforcement at this time. I know that's kind of a change from my position of several years ago, but I'm looking at the situation it is now. But I respect this board, and I know we'll have a discussion now. And regardless of how it is, the outcome, as the mayor, I will certainly work with the board members to move whatever decision that the board makes forward. So.
Okay, well, thank you. So at the last meeting, the May meeting, I asked the attorney to draft language for an STR amortization provision, which is obviously included in your agenda packet. Everybody has saw that. It gives a 3-year period, at which point the STR must stop renting their homes on a short-term basis. At this point, the next step as far as I know, is to send this to the planning board. And so everybody has seen the verbiage. And so I'm just making a recommendation that we send it to the planning board for feedback.
Mm-hmm. And if it goes to the planning board, they would have basically 3 choices: one to approve or recommend approval, or recommend not approval, or taking no action. And I know that if this does happen, it's important that we have our legal representatives there to answer any questions that the members of the planning board might have.
Absolutely.
Bob, would you like to make any comments as a part of the discussion?
So one thing I do want to point out is, as I drafted this amendment, I set a date of September 15th, 2027. There's nothing magic about that date. I chose that date, at least for consideration, because the short-term rental ordinance in place right now essentially grandfathered or treated pre-existing non-conforming rentals as non-conforming uses if they were in operation as of September 15th, 2022. So that's why I chose the September 15th date to be consistent. The net effect would be, if this goes through as written, and if it is approved by the board, it would be a 5-year period from when they were identified as non-conforming uses. It would be a 3-year period, approximately. I kind of take 2-3 months to work through the process, approximately 3 years. The courts that have upheld amortization have, as part of that approval, have looked at the period of time of the amortization period. There's again, no magic number. There's a number of local governments years ago before the General Assembly prohibited it, who amortized non-conforming outdoor advertising billboards. And they typically would give a 6 to 8 year period. What the courts look at is the period reasonable? Is it partly to allow those affected to recoup their investment? You may, again, when it comes decision time, you may decide, or the planning board may even recommend a different time period, and that's fine. One of the reasons I chose 3 years, 2027, number one, I felt like that was a defensible, assuming that we can survive a challenge to the concept at all. I feel like that's a reasonable period, given that it's not like a billboard that has to be removed and taken down. These units will still be, if you pass some amortization provision, would still be able to be used for residential uses. So it's not as dramatic a change of use as removing a billboard or removing a business completely. The other reason I chose 3 years is I'm confident that there will be a legal challenge, and legal challenges take some time to go through a trial court decision, an appeal to the Court of Appeals, a possible appeal to the state Supreme Court. That process can take 2 to 3 years. And I'm very confident that the court would not allow us to enforce a shorter amortization period while the litigation is pending. So 3 years, in my view, would be a good predictor of how long it would take to get a final definitive answer from our courts. So that's an explanation of why that date is what I proposed. I would say a couple of other things, and we've talked about this before. You'll recall that when you were considering amortization previously, the town received a letter from an organization called the Institute for Justice. The Institute for Justice is a national public interest law firm that has, I guess I would describe it as a more libertarian bent. They are strong believers in property rights, and I'm saying this not to be critical. I'm just laying out my understanding, my interpretation. And they actually jumped into the lawsuit against Wilmington a couple of years ago, and they were really troubled with Wilmington's amortization provision. They wrote you all a letter explaining their view of the law and pretty clearly indicating that if the town at that point, and I would assume if the town at this point does adopt amortization, we will see them in court. So I don't say that to scare you. I just want to make sure you and the public understand that I think it's almost certain that there will be a legal challenge. A couple of other comments on that legal challenge. I would anticipate that the arguments will be that the town lacks the authority to do amortization. And even if the town has the authority, that it's unconstitutional. We do have some case law in North Carolina, one Supreme Court decision that I'm aware of involving the amortization of a junkyard. There are, I believe, 2 Court of Appeals opinions that upheld amortization of outdoor advertising billboards. One of the arguments that the Institute for Justice put forth in the Wilmington case is a contention that they believed amortization, that the holdings only upheld amortization for what they described as nuisance activities. And I had a pretty rigorous discussion and debate with the attorney from the Institute for Justice, and even made the point at argument in the Court of Appeals. In my view, what's more of a nuisance? Passing 2 billboards on the highway, on the interstate, that might be too close together, or having a short-term rental that are party houses on either side of your house. So I'm not persuaded by the nuisance argument, but I would expect that we would get that argument along with, as I said, an argument that we just lack the authority, and that even if we have the authority, it's unconstitutional under a variety of constitutional theories, due process, takings. There's a relatively unique provision in the North Carolina Constitution that protects our citizens' rights to the fruits of their labor. And that is a clause that we are seeing being invoked more and more in our courts. I would also say, and again, this is not an attempt to dissuade you if you choose to go this route. It's not my purpose. I just want you to do it with eyes wide open and for your residents to understand. a lot of North Carolina local government lawyers who I talk to frequently, we have detected what we think has been a trend over the last 10, 12, 15 years in our courts of rulings that tend to favor property rights over local government authority and reading local government authority more narrowly. It's just a trend that we have seen in our courts over the last 10 or 15 years. So I think it's more of a challenge to defend in court amortization now than it would have been 15 years ago. That doesn't mean I'm not prepared to defend it, but I think we need to at least consider the makeup of our courts and the direction our courts have gone on some of these issues. The last point I'll make, Mayor, and you all know this, but there was a bill that was introduced this session that really didn't go anywhere. As the gentleman said, I'm not aware of any jurisdiction in North Carolina that yet has attempted to amortize short-term rentals. So if you do it, you will be the first. I don't know if that would trigger a legislative response. It might, and certainly the legislature as the sovereign, the state as the sovereign, has the ability to clearly say no, amortization is not allowed, or Highlands doesn't have the right to amortize, or amortization cannot be used with short-term rental. Any kind of legislative response could happen. And again, I'm not suggesting that either my description of what I see going on in our courts or what might happen in the legislature, I don't say those things to discourage you from going in this direction if you choose to do so. I just want you to do so with, as I said, eyes wide open.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Bob, or do we have any questions or discussion among ourselves?
I'd just like to say a few things.
Okay,
Kind
go right
of
ahead.
put it in perspective. What was in our UDO in 2021 when we decided, when we took the step to say we were going to enforce it, was that these are the words, overnight accommodations are commercial. That's an intent to say that short-term rentals, which was not part of the vernacular in 2012, okay, that just wasn't what they were called. And if you had changed what they were called, did that mean you would have to change them? So overnight accommodations was a general term to say that they were commercial. And the commercial does not belong in our residential communities, our residential neighborhoods. We have no residential neighborhoods right now that don't have short-term rentals. Seems to me that there ought to be some rights of people who have homes to have the quiet enjoyment of their home. They go to business, they come, or wherever they come from, and they come and they live here and they become part of the community and they contribute to the community. And they don't need to be, they ought to have the right to have somewhere that they can live that does not have a business next door to them. The people that we got who are professional planners to do the community comprehensive plan used the term mini hotels. I didn't use that term. I didn't make up that term. They used that term. So they see those things as mini hotels. Nobody wants to live next to a mini hotel. One of the things that sells Highlands and why our economy has always been good and has weathered all the ups and downs is because we sell the calm and the quiet that you can't get anywhere else. Yes, it's the cool, it's the climate, it's the natural beauty, but it's also the calm and the quiet. We have a lot of these neighborhoods that have one-way roads in and one-way roads out because of our topography, which means they're not through streets, which means they don't have traffic on them all the time other than residents. The other thing that I would say is, if you think about it, when you have somebody renting and they turn over every week or 2 weeks, what happens is all the things that those people who come and want to visit, want to see, are seen every week or two. In other words, if I live here, maybe I go up Satula a couple of times, or up Whitesides a couple of times, or to the Iron Bridge a couple of times. But I don't go, I'm not every week, somebody that lives in my house doesn't go up there. If you turn into a lot of rentals, then you have those people who are now suddenly crowding our natural environment, and you are degrading our natural environment. So part of what people are coming for, we will lose if we become a visitor place as opposed to a residence place. And you can be a resident, a seasonal resident. I'm not saying that you can't, you have to be a permanent resident here, but you have to live here to where you actually are invested in the community. That's why every church on Main Street, every church in town probably has had major construction in the last few years. That's not from short-term rental people. That's from people who want to be part of the community. We have a performing arts center. It's not from short-term rental people. They may go to it, but they didn't build it. We have a visual arts center. That's from people who have invested in the community. And a lot of those are seasonal renters who come up here, seasonal residents who come up here for the calm and the quiet. And you're going to lose that unless you want to say there is some place that they can live that's not next to a mini hotel. Again, not my term, the planner's terms. I'm not spinning that. That's what they call them. So all I'm saying is we certainly need to seriously think of what the long-term economy, and frankly, what we love about Highlands, how do we protect that? And it's not to become a visitor's place. Everybody says the visitors come and then they buy a home. Well, maybe they do, but a lot of the visitors come and buy a home so they can short-term rental them. But the other thing is remember the intent from the beginning, and it was in the UDO in 2020, 21. Well, but when we started taking this action, the intent is that overnight accommodations are commercial. They don't belong in residential areas. And that's why, even though we did not do amortization initially, they said we stopped the bleeding, but we stopped inflicting more wounds, but we haven't healed the wound yet. And so that's why I think it's least worth sending to the planning board. In my opinion, it's worth more than that, but the first step is to send it to the planning board and have us seriously consider if amortization is not what the best is for Highlands now and in the future. Okay. So I would make a move that we send this language to the planning board for their make a motion that we send this language to the planning board for their consideration.
I'll second that.
Have a second. So we have a motion on the floor,
And discussion.
but I will still continue with the discussion.
Just like I stated at the last meeting, I don't disagree that if COVID numbers had stayed, we would have a serious problem if nothing had happened. And I know you mentioned stop the bleeding, but I've also heard terms like traditional neighborhoods. I grew up in a traditional neighborhood. I knew everybody in the neighborhood. I played with all the kids in the neighborhood. I went to school with all the kids in the neighborhood, and we lived there 12 months a year. And maybe the Highlands traditional neighborhood is different because my neighborhood, 5, 6, 7 months out of the year, half the people are gone. And I love the other people that come. Obviously, I mean, it's the seasonal people are fantastic to have here. They're the fabric of our town. It's what we are. But the fact that, I mean, when I got here again 31 years ago, that you could short-term rent a house a lot of places. I mean, there were real estate companies here that was their primary income, and had been for a very, very long time. And I still think that the problem we had during COVID was this place was overrun with a lot of people. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there's problem houses. I lived on a street on Holt Knob for 2.5 years, whatever it was. And in those 2.5 years, as I mentioned, over 50% on my side of Holt Knob, over 50% of the homes were short-term rentals. And I realize a lot of people have problems with them at their neighborhood, but I never had a problem with a single one of them. I mean, I had problems with one of the neighbors, but they lived there all the time. So, I mean, they played loud music. They complained if anything happened around them. All these things. And how do I get rid of them? Wish I could have amortized them, but they were full time. And my point about it is we just listened to our attorney and I realize he's just giving us all the possibles, but I think we're going to get in a lawsuit. There's no question if we stay going down this road. I really do think, and I'm going to use the term I used last time, we stop the bleeding. I'm in the same mindset that the mayor is, that, we realize that Granicus was, in my opinion, a complete and utter mistake. It never really panned out. The new folks that we've been talking to seem to have their finger on the pulse. Now, of course, they may just be great salespeople, but we will find that out hopefully because we're initiating with them. But we got to work on enforcement. And I realize that's difficult. We've already talked about code enforcement officers and all these things that we need. And that's not just for short-term rentals. That's for people staying at the hotels and loud and obnoxious walking down the street. I mean, that's just the nature of we are a residential community, but we also we're a tourist town. I mean, I know a lot of people cringe when we say that, but we're a tourist town. And that's not going to change. But I can't see spending not millions, but hundreds of thousands potentially taxpayer dollars to fight something that I think we're already heading down the path to regulate. Now, I just mentioned that I rent a house. I sold my house. I'm renting a house. I'm buying property. I'm not going to build in Horse Cove, obviously. And during that year, I now have, people that are against STR should be happy with me because I just took one off the market. I signed a year plus lease of a short-term rental and it can never come back. That lease just took it off. Its grandfather is gone. So that's happening more and more because the trend, STRs are still doing okay, but the trend is not strong for short-term rentals. And I realize there's problem houses and we need to deal with those. And that's where I stand on it. I'm not in favor of sending it to the planning board because I'm not going to be in favor of it if it comes back to us positive.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody on the tip that what we're talking about is sending it to the planning board. Like, I think we have plenty of time to debate this. There'll be a public hearing in the future, all of this. We're just talking about sending it to the planning
I
board.
understand, but if I'm not in favor of it, I don't think it makes sense for me to suggest or vote to send it to the planning board.
And that's fine. I would just to
I'm anxious to hear that. I know it's going to head there, but I'm anxious to hear their
comment on a couple of your things. The trend may be going down, but the trend can come back up. It's a cyclical kind
Yeah,
of
and
thing.
unfortunately, my experience at Mirror Lake is not what yours is with short-term rentals. I wish it was, but it's not.
You have a problem house?
Yes, multiple problem houses.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I just think it's not unreasonable that that our residential, and okay, maybe it's not a 12-month traditional neighborhood, but it's a traditional neighborhood because I know people who get together with their neighbors that are seasonal residents every year for parties.
Mhm.
Their summer gathering kind of thing, and it's their neighborhood party.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So it's enough of a traditional neighborhood. Okay. The fact is that yes, we had short-term. We may have had rentals in the past, but that doesn't mean that we need them in the future when they have become so out of control. It's like, okay, when you first got automobiles, you didn't have speed limits because you didn't go very fast anyway. Now we have to have speed limits. You can't say, well, you never had speed limits before.
I agree with that there should be regulations and there should be speed limits, just like there's rules and ordinances that have been passed. I don't think we should put a regulator on the car so it can never go over 40 again. So it was like it was in the 20s. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or you don't take the car away because now they drive too fast. And that's from a premise. I agree with you, and you have speed limits, and that's why we have rules, and that's why we need to figure out the best way to enforce it and understand who is one. Because right now, if you look at Granicus, we're somewhere between this and this. The College of Charleston just did a huge study about STRs, and they deal with it in Charleston more than we do. It's a great study. I will send it to everybody here, and I'll make it available to everybody. But it's a great study, and if you read it, they said when it came to elected officials, 86% of them and there were 2,200 elected officials, and no, it was elected officials, 2,200 elected officials that said they don't even know enough about STRs and the actual facts on numbers and problems, et cetera, to even set policy. So I would be happy to send that. It's a huge document. But my point about it is Granicus was a failure, in my opinion. The new company, I think, is going to be better. We need to work on enforcement, no question. And that's just, like I said, that's just where I stand. I think that it is heading in the right direction. We are losing STRs, just like the ordinance says.
And
That
how do you know that since Granicus hasn't been with us?
I can guarantee you one of them.
Why?
Yeah, and like I said, when you said about the neighborhoods where all the neighborhood gets together with everybody, has that stopped? Have those parties stopped? I mean, I just moved to Webmont. They
That's
have
why
one
the
every
man,
year.
that's why the man told me about it, is it doesn't work anymore because half of them are STRs.
Okay. I'm not sure what Webmont still has theirs.
Well, all I'm saying is maybe I don't have a personal, story to tell. But that doesn't mean there aren't the stories out there that
No.
I listen to.
No, I know. I've heard stories both ways, and I've even heard people that are dead set against it, but they admitted to me that I've never actually had a problem with one. I just don't like the idea of it. I hear a lot of that.
Right, but the problem is
And I know he's had problems.
I'm trying to argue both
I
points.
understand.
Okay, problem houses, get rid of those, but also the fact that, you know, if 10 to 20% of a neighborhood, or 50%, is that what you said in Holt
So
Knob?
where I was, yeah.
Is a SDR, that is not good for our long-term economy. That is not good for our long-term economy because it's cyclical. You just said there is as many people aren't doing it as they used to do, as they did 3 years ago.
Right.
So that goes down.
Right.
And maybe those no longer be STRs, but what I'm saying is if they rent twice a year, then they can put it on the books and keep their grandfathering and still and come back as an STR. And that's not good for our, because they're no longer long-term renting it. They're not going to sell it. That's what, you know, we already have a housing problem here with no long-term rentals and rentals way high.
I know very well. It took me a while to find one. And when I found one, though, he said the short-term renting was hard on the house and he didn't want to do it anymore. And he rented it to me, assuming I won't be.
So
hard on
right
the
there,
house.
it's hard on the house, but the neighbors aren't supposed to care about it. I mean, it's just like, it just keep answering the own question.
Well, you have a story of that. I'll give you the story of and this was probably in 2020. It was probably just before the pandemic. They would rent seasonal rent, come up here and rent for 3 months, and they rented for 3 months so that they didn't have to pay sales taxes over 90 days. But they didn't want to own a house up here because they were both aging and they didn't want to have the upkeep on the house when it wouldn't be here. They were paying for a 3-month rental. They were paying $21,000. Okay, they couldn't come the next year because the rent had been elevated, had been doubled to $42,000. So you're actually getting rid of people who actually want to come and be part of our community. They could have made money on that house at $21,000, but they decided they wanted to make more money. Okay, and they lost people for our community. So you can, there are arguments on both sides of the story. And so haven't had any personal experience with it, but those are the stories that I'm hearing. Is that we can't even rent. I know people who had a hard time finding a house to buy, even though they had a job here or long-term rent here. Right. Because everything wants to be a short-term rental because they want to make that much money in 3 months as opposed to a long-term rental.
Yeah, I mean, I can't afford to buy a house in the city limits that's not a short-term rental. That you said they're valued more when they're short-term rentals. I mean, because the house prices after COVID just went through the roof. And it's not just the short-term rentals, they all went through the roof.
Yeah, I'd say
that's why I sold my house when I did.
That's the housing market, right?
Yeah, it's just the market went crazy everywhere. So, but I mean, I'm just gonna, at this point, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree because I'm on the other side of it.
Okay. We have a motion in a second.
If we have a motion on the floor,
I have one question for
then I'll
Bob.
call the question. Go ahead.
Bob, I've been conflicted here since we've been talking about this. A lot of people, what we did is we converted what we had to non-conforming use. And a lot of people have used the term grandfathering. Is there legally a difference?
I think grandfathering is a more informal way of saying non-conforming use. Non-conforming use means, and non-conforming use is terminology that is found in Chapter 160D, the planning and zoning statutes. I don't believe the word grandfathering appears anywhere in 160D. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it does not. So grandfathering is a more informal way of characterizing what the law calls a non-conforming use.
Any other questions of Bob? Hearing none, I'm gonna go ahead now and call the question. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion to send this language to the planning board, would you please raise your hand, signify by saying aye? Okay, and then same side for those who are opposed. All right, the motion carries. It will be sent to the planning board and we'll coordinate that, Josh, with our attorney and Michael, setting that up as part of the meeting. Correct? Okay, very good. Okay, thank y'all for the spirited discussion. And we're moving on to the next item, which will be financial matters, Rebecca Schuler. And Rebecca always has to come up and do this in June as we try to tidy up loose ends of the budget before we take a new one on.
We did good.
Mhm.
So as you can see in the agenda packet, and as the mayor said, every year in June, we do a little wrap up of budget amendments just to cover all the departments and all the different things. And this year I was excited when I started going through them. They actually were not as many as we've had in the past. That's
This
awesome.
is because we have to have a balanced budget.
Exactly. Yes. So have them in your agenda packet. You have any questions? Let me know.
You want to do them individually? or
You can do them all together.
So there's 3 of them?
I think so. There was general
Or 4 of
fund.
them?
There was general fund, water and sewer, electric,
Fire.
and fire. Yes. So there's 4.
So we do them all in one.
You can do them all in one.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All three. Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye. Thank you. All right, the next item, and I know Josh Ward, our town manager, might want to weigh in on the community building budget amendment.
First, the community building renovation is coming to a close. There's a couple of things that the county inspections saw when they did a walkthrough for the pre-inspection for the certificate of occupancy. The door on the Poplar Street side where we have the new ramp going up to it, the platform itself is in compliance, but barely. And once we looked at it, we realized we'd have to move the door over. So after looking at that, instead of moving the door or replacing the door where it would swing the other way, we're going to actually create a larger platform up top, which will give a lot more room. Someone with a wheelchair to get up and get moved around and get to the door. So that was an addition. Also, the county wanted a platform for the maintenance of the vents coming out of the hood in the kitchen. They're up on the roof. So basically just an area for the folks that come in to do the maintenance, to stand on, to click their safety off, to open that vent and to maintain that, which happens maybe once a year. They wanted that, as well as the loading dock did not require any safety railing there because
It's below 30 inches.
below 30 inches, but it's still a large drop. So what we were afraid of is somebody could be leaning against part of the railing, step over and fall off, and it was a safety hazard. So basically we're having them to create some type of temporary railing system that can be removed. So that way when we have a delivery there, it can be removed. The delivery is taken into the back door of the kitchen. So that total on that was $20,000. So the recommendation is to approve that so we can get moving on that to finish the project up.
So this is for this budget year amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
They're
is
going to
that,
try to do this within the next 2 weeks. That is complete.
okay.
Or in
So-
other words, we'll be meeting back at the community building in July.
Possibly.
Close.
I hope so.
Hopefully.
I don't want to promise anything to anybody the way things go, but hopefully they can jump on these items. I don't know how long it's going to take for the upstairs, or the roof unit. I think the county is going to let us file the temporary CO, which hopefully will be possibly issued tomorrow to get people in the door. I would rather have the platform completed, and hopefully they can do that next week. They can start that project and knock that out next week. But again, we don't know timelines.
And I will say this, that, this whole idea, we had the ADA study plan. One of the critical areas was making sure that the community building was fully accessible. What we have now, as Josh has pointed out, it could pass, but we don't want to just barely pass. Now's the time to do it to where there's no question that we're in compliance.
Right. So we also, to add to that, we also have the equipment, which Doc Wilson raised the equipment. I think the Highlands Rotary gave a large chunk of that. And he had some other donations.
Oh, cool.
So what we're going to do is we went ahead and ordered the equipment through Manning Brothers. And I think they actually delivered a couple pieces today. A couple pieces were several weeks out. And those will be installed as they come in. And then the Rotary will actually write a check to the town for that to cover that cost. So it'll be all new equipment within the kitchen.
So we've completed the last budget amendment, the shingle roof thing.
Yes, we have.
Was it $20,000?
The quote was for 14,000. We did 17 to cover any roof repairs. They didn't need any roof repairs. So what is in the change order is the side of the building needed to be repainted because there were certain boards that had to be touched up. So there was different color paint because it had faded out. So I gave them the okay. They've already actually painted that whole half of the building to match.
What I'm asking is, we used our whole $17,000 so that we can't apply that to this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my only comment about it is even when we get a temporary CO, and are allowed to move in, so to speak, the access is accessible as far as ADA, but I have serious concerns about the ADA for egress. Like if you have somebody on that the back exit in a wheelchair needs to use a ramp, the way it is right now, until this gets rectified, it's a problem. And that concerns me more than anything else we just talked about, but. Yeah.
So I make a motion that we, for this budget amendment for $20,000 to finally finish up the
Yeah,
community.
I'll second it.
Second. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying aye. Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you, Josh. All right, the next item, Commissioner Steeler, the playground funding and.
Yeah, and I want to start before I get into the actual ask here. I want to just give you a very brief background. So this all started 2 years ago when we had an anonymous donor come forth with a $50,000 pledge towards a new playground. That next spring, a group was formed, kind of an advisory group that looked at the project and the fundraising campaign, and Jeff came on board at that point. We worked with Carolina Parks and Play out of Charlotte, who is a design build company for playgrounds. And we developed a plan, an estimated cost of approximately $1.6 million to construct a new playground that would serve Highlands well into the future. So if you look at our current playground, it's in a pretty, it's not very, I guess there's some safety issues, and then also it's not the best of facilities. So to cover the cost of this playground, we have different areas of funding. So the first area of funding was a $500,000 PARTIF grant that we're still waiting to hear from, and we should receive that news sometime in August. The second part of the funding is what Jeff talked about earlier. He and I went to the Macon County Commissioner meeting on June 11th and asked for $350,000, and we are set to go back on July 9th, where we're going to give a more detailed presentation of the county for that ask. So it is, again, it's not going to be in their budget. It would be a fund balance appropriation at that point. So again, we're still waiting to hear from that. So then the third area we're getting funding from is private donations and small grants. So our goal is to raise $600,000, and to date, we've been at this for about 3-4 weeks, and we've raised $130,000 in that time. So there's a lot more that's going to come on that. You're going to hear more about it, but that the private funding is very strong, and we have a lot of interest in that. And then the final source would come from the town of Highlands, and that's what I'd like for you guys to consider tonight. And that's asking for the board to contribute, or to to plan to contribute $250,000, which is 15% of the total project cost. So I throw that out to the board.
And you want us to basically just have a resolution, so we're putting in, committing when the time's appropriate, the 250, and that'll be kind of an example for the county.
The county, exactly.
And I just wanted to mention, just the only thing to add, everybody, when you hear so for 31 years, I've been in this town in construction, design, development, business. That's all I've ever done here, and prior for that matter. But when I tried to estimate this project, I was more off on this than I ever have been on anything I've ever done, because I didn't understand. I was very much too low. But I didn't understand it. So when you started seeing the number breakdowns, the thing about this project that I love the most is it is completely accessible. It's all inclusive, all abilities, every child can use it. And probably, what was the number, 300,000 plus alone was just for the appropriate surface.
No, 500,000.
500,000 for the appropriate surface to be all inclusive.
It's almost, it's like,
and I missed it by 600. So I had no idea it was going to be that. But the only playground I've ever done is the one by the Methodist Church. So that's a little smaller. But with that said, I just want to point out, and the equipment itself is very expensive, and I'm positive a lot of that comes with their own liability coverage that they stow away. But I just want to mention that $500,000 alone of this is just for the all inclusivity, which every penny is worth it in my mind. But so.
Okay. Comments?
Questions?
What is your timeline? I think I asked this before.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, we hope to have the funding wrapped up by late fall and be able to start in the spring.
So this coming fiscal year is when you.
Correct.
And the key to it is also, like, once we initiate a contract with somebody, there's a hefty lead time for the equipment itself. So, you start the contract and not a lot's going to happen, because we're not going to tear it up and let it sit there for months while we're waiting on equipment. So it'll be keyed out, but that's why we'd like to get it started sooner than later, so that next year it can actually be in operation and available.
So I would just entertain a motion a resolution, if you will, that at an appropriate time, after all the fundraising comes in, that we will do a budget amendment for $250,000 for this project.
I move I know Jeff and Brian don't want to do it. I move that we pledge a contribution of $250,000 from the town for the all accessible playground for our children.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion? I don't think so. Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye. Thank you. All right, very good. All right, our last agenda item. And it was in your packet, the new proposed changes to our personnel manual update. And I'll turn this over to Josh Ward to go over the process and what we're looking at.
So you have in your packet the old personnel manual, the new recommended personnel manual, and you have, it's hard to do a red line version as we discussed last meeting. So you have a breakdown of the different sections that were amended. So as part of the salary study, Erica Phillips with the MAPS group redrafted the town's personnel manual to ensure it complies with current labor standards. Ms. Phillips also met with staff to review and correct any contradictions. that existed within the document and ensure the policies accurately describe the way they are carried out on a day-to-day basis. So the staff has reviewed this document multiple times and recommends the approval of the updated manual that you have in your packet.
Any questions of,
I have
Oh, Josh.
one. I have one. So I have had several town employees ask me a question because related to the section 9. Sorry, going back here. Section 9 related to
Do you have a page?
251 is the original, correct? And actually that section really, I'm sorry, page 251. Get back to it.
And that's in the original.
was that the new or old?
It is, well, it didn't change this far.
Have to be the new.
It would have to be the
Page
new.
number.
That's not 251 though, that's the old. Sorry. It's, yeah, this section 11, sorry, of the new.
So it's page
252.
252,
No, the new.
substituting for another employee. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's different. Sorry. I'm sorry, I did not mark it, didn't earmark it. It's more of a question. So I had a lot of employees from town, street crew, electric, et cetera, ask me a question. And I don't know if it was just a policy change. Of course, it would be in here. But, and it's more of a question if this is normal or if something's changed in the past year. So if I'm on a street crew or on a Monday, I have to go to a doctor's appointment, I take a day off. And then on Wednesday, there's a water line break and the water crew goes out and works on it for 16 hours. They get paid straight pay, not overtime, because they took 8 hours off, even though it was a vacation time. So do you understand what I'm saying? That's correct. It's not always been that way.
No, it has not. So FLSA says you have to work
Yeah,
40
you have to
hours.
actually
to get
work.
Right, that's the minimum standard.
Yes.
Okay.
So what had happened is when we looked into this,
Mhm.
there were some issues between departments that was not apples to apples. So certain departments were operating that way, some were not. So what we did was we went back to the FSLA standard, which is working 40 hours before you get overtime. And that was the cleanest.
That's standard in any workplace.
And that's what we realized once we
Right.
started researching is that standard, you have to work 40
Yeah.
hours before you get.
Yeah, you
Before
can't
you
you
get
can't use comp time and get overtime.
And that's the way it's worked now. But no, it was not, it was different in the past
Okay, right.
for some of those departments, yes.
But that was a policy change a year ago.
So that was a policy change we had to do to be accurate illegally.
Understood.
Because some departments were treated it one way, some were treated another. We had to make sure that we were doing it legally, and we referred back to the FSLA standard of work 40 hours a week before you get overtime.
And it has to be consistent from department to department.
Yes.
But if you have, okay, forget about comp time. If you have a vacation day and you take it because you have to take somebody to the doctor or yourself. And then you work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you were asked, hey, can you work Saturday? Because we need somebody on the trash truck. They don't get overtime for Saturday. So there's no incentive for them really to come on a Saturday, and drive 30 miles each way, which, okay,
They get paid, they just don't get paid overtime.
yeah, I understand that, but
That's kind of standard. Every place I've ever worked, that's the standard. I mean, I've
Well,
never
I'm-
heard it otherwise.
I need to disappoint my employees because I don't do that. So, I mean, it wasn't that, I'm only saying that that's not, and I realize maybe it was different between departments, but it wasn't that way over a year ago. It was just a policy change to make it even among the just with how hard it is for us to retain and attract. But there is an exemption in here for callbacks. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In emergency callbacks. as well.
Emergency
Not just
callback.
who's on call, but if others are having to be called in for storm outages,
Right.
storm, whatever. it
So
may
then the
be,
40
water
goes-
break, whatever. it
But
may
the 40
be.
goes out the window.
If additional people have to be called in other than one that's on call, then they will get up.
But if, like I said, if they actually took a vacation day, like they got 2 weeks vacation, they take one day to go somewhere, that means that they only going to work 32 hours a week. And if they end up working an extra day, there's no overtime involved.
Other than that call back time, that emergency call back time.
But a lot of long-term employees have been, I'm not saying that that makes it right, but it's kind of one of those things it's been that way forever and then it got taken away from them. And I'm just bringing it up because we had the whole subject of trying to be fair to, I mean, not fair, but like the police department. And I realize, I mean, it's pennies on the dollar for us, but it's potentially big for them and also getting people to come in on weekends and after hours. And well, I'm not going in, I'm getting straight pay. I'll do it next week when I'm not taking a day off to go to the doctor. I'm just raising the question because
That could happen.
Yeah, I guess with whatever the standard is, we have to apply that. And
well, that's the minimum. That's the minimum standard.
yeah, but what I'm saying is I know of several that take advantage of it too.
And if comp time's used for it, I understand that. I understand that. Okay. I just want to raise the question so I understood it because I didn't understand that.
Any other questions of Josh?
So you need a motion to approve the new policy?
Correct.
Well, I didn't read the whole thing, so I'm counting on y'all to have done it correctly.
And you're not a personnel expert.
I'm not a personnel expert. So I move we approve the new Town of Highlands policy manual, personnel policy manual.
I'll second that.
Okay, got a second? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Very well. Okay, that gets us down to the item 17 at this meeting.
Make a
That
motion
is
to adjourn.
adjourned.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Dark outside. Of course, this is the longest day of the year, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's dark outside. We're leaving.